Ang Lee's Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon would change the landscape of world cinema. On a relatively modest budget of $17 million, the fantasy martial arts epic would become an international cultural phenomenon like no other, heralded by both critics and audiences as the pinnacle of what was once a very niche Chinese genre. Wuxia, or literally martial heroes, is a staple of Chinese fiction that depicts the heroic adventures of often Robin Hood-like martial artists against the backdrop of historical China, and is notable for its genre-bending qualities. Traditionally, Wuxia features martial arts action based in wushu techniques, although highly exaggerated to give its heroes superhuman abilities. Born from over 2,000-year-old Chinese fables, the genre is predominantly found in the form of fantasy literature, although it has seen countless adaptations in both film and television, as well as video games and comic books. The earliest examples of wuxia in cinema date back to the 1920s, and by the 1960s, legendary filmmakers like King Hu and Yu Fong, often in partnership with Hong Kong's Shaw Brothers Studio, were delivering complex fight choreography with innovative special effects, all of which began to attract a wider international viewership. In the US, 1972 would see the premiere of the David Carradine-starring martial arts action series Kung Fu, which carried themes, characters, and settings heavily influenced by the wuxia genre. And in the 1990s, blockbuster films like Mortal Kombat and The Matrix further normalized the gravity-defying choreography of wuxia, paving the way for an all-out genre renaissance in the early 2000s. And who better to tackle this precious staple of Chinese action cinema than the master of existential family dramas? Of course, one of Ang Lee's other favorite subjects, forbidden love, lies at the heart of the film, and defying tradition, the ambitious director would set out to create an action movie that was as strong in its characters and themes as it was in its spectacle. And so, with an ensemble of A-list talent at his side and backed by a major multinational alliance, the soft-spoken indie filmmaker would fulfill his childhood dream of not just making an outstanding martial arts film,
swagger down the street with your red lips and funky beat. You better hold your head up to the sky. I'm gonna roll with you till the day I die. Hey, swing those hips around. Can't stop, roll back down. My ladies, short, tall, thin or wide.
martial arts cinema. A close friend of director Ang Lee suggested that he try his hand at a kung fu fight movie, and recommended to Lee a series of romantic fantasy novels by celebrated Chinese author Wang Dulu. Known as the Crane Iron Pentalogy, the series consisted of 5 serialized novels released between 1940 and 1944, and Lee would especially be taken by the 4th book, feeling it would best serve his cinematic vision. Wo Hu Keng Long, or Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, is a literal translation of a Chinese idiom that refers to a person's hidden talent or strength. A warning not to underestimate others, itself deriving from an ancient Chinese poem. The title also directly refers to the names of our 2 young leads, Zhen and Lo, the last character of Lo's birth name, Xiao Hu, meaning Little Tiger, and Zhen's full Chinese name, Zhao Long, meaning Delicate Dragon. This meaning is perhaps most evident in Zhen keeping her true strength hidden from Jade Fox, her secret master. The title may also be interpreted as commenting on the underlying desires and civil unrest of polite society, repression being another common theme in Ang Lee's filmography, and this is underlined in the film by the unsaid love between Li Mu Bai and Yu Shu Lien. Lee had been yearning to make a martial arts film since he was a young boy, having grown up engrossed in what was considered to be the pulpier side of Chinese pop culture, and would come to the production armed with boundary-breaking concepts that would push the genre into a new era. However, in Chinese filmmaking tradition, auteur directors like Lee were not normally the kind considered to helm martial arts action movies, which by that time had begun to lose their luster. Because of this, Li and co-writer James Schamus, in partnership with producer Shu Lien, would struggle to secure funding. And at one point, the producers had even locked in the support of a major Taiwanese studio before the deal crumbled apart over creative differences. Ultimately, the film would have to be a massive international endeavor, seeing a total of 6 established production companies rallying behind the project. Hong Kong's Edco Film, China Film Productions Corporation, the Taiwan-based Zoom Hunt Productions, and American companies Columbia Pictures Film Production Asia, Good Machine International, and Sony Pictures Classics. 2 additional companies, Asian Union Film and Entertainment and United China Vision, were formed specifically for this production. On a story level, the film is a very condensed and loose adaptation of Wang Dulu's novel, and would be written for the screen by American writer and filmmaker James Schamus with heavy input from Ang Lee. The script would be subsequently reworked and translated from English to Mandarin by Taiwanese screenwriter Wang Weiling and Chinese writer and critic Tsai Kuo-yung. At the time, Wang Weiling came with but one screenwriting credit to her name, 1994's Oscar-nominated dramedy Eat, Drink, Man, Woman, which she co-wrote with Schamus and director Ang Lee. James Schamus, who was also the co-founder of Good Machine Productions and the film's executive producer, had begun his career collaboration with Lee in the early 1990s, co-writing Lee's debut feature film Pushing Hands, and going on to co-write 4 more of Lee's films before Crouching Tiger. Principal photography would begin in July 1999, and while the film would be partly shot in Beijing at the Beijing Film Studios, on-location shooting sprawled across 4 separate Chinese provinces. And Lee and the production would also take full advantage of the then recently constructed Hengdian World Studios, which at 800 acres is one of the largest filming complexes in the world. In their deal reached with Columbia Pictures, the studio agreed to front $6 million for the film, however, would not pay out any dividends to the producers until it profited at least 6 times that amount. And the production would additionally be bonded by the studio to ensure that the film was completed on time and within budget. Ang Lee later stated that in the 8 months he spent on the film, which included 5 straight months of shooting, he hadn't taken a single day off, and added that by the time filming wrapped, he had taken up smoking again. According to editor Tim Squires, the production schedule was so restrictive that the film could only be screened once for studio executives, who, to their relief, had no notes to give. Fun fact, the year of the film's release, 2000, was the Chinese Year of the Dragon. The film wastes no time in setting the story in motion, with eminent Wudang swordsman Li Mu Bai tasking his old friend and warrior Yu Shu Lien with gifting his precious sword, the Green Destiny, on his behalf, intending it to be given to their mutual friend and benefactor, Sir Ti, in Beijing, where Shu Lien plans to deliver a convoy of important shipments. The quiet village featured at the start of the film is Hongchun, or Hong Village, an actual 900-year-old Chinese village that was made a World Heritage Site the same year of filming. It was crucial for Lee and the writers to balance character development and story with the film's fight sequences, and opening the film with a 5-minute dialogue scene certainly goes against the grain of standard Chinese action cinema. In fact, Lee wanted the dialogue to resemble that of a King Hu film, which would seem very unnatural to Western viewers, and at first clashed with writer and producer James Schamus as he struggled to understand the cultural context. The language itself would also become a major obstacle for the production, and at first, Lee had even considered shooting 2 versions of the film simultaneously, one in English and one in Mandarin, but ultimately settled on this approach being a waste of time. The film was, of course, subtitled for non-Mandarin speaking audiences, but most of the main cast members, with the exception of Zhang Ziyi, either didn't speak Mandarin natively or came with a distinctly different regional accent. Editor Tim Squires, an English-speaking American, did not speak Mandarin whatsoever, creating an added layer of complexity to the already challenging process of editing an action film. To overcome this, Squires would have to use a translation of the script as his linguistic compass. Having been educated in the West, Ang Lee personally oversaw the editing of the film's English subtitles to ensure that they would make sense to Western audiences while maintaining the essence of their Chinese meaning. Upon the film's release in China, however, some markets required a redubbing of the actors' voices in standard Mandarin because audiences were having trouble understanding the international cast's foreign accents. Li did receive some blowback from his Chinese critics over his handling of the language, but the director pointed out that almost none of his characters are from Beijing originally, although this is considered the standard Mandarin accent. In the US, an English language dub was created with special care taken to match the mouth movements of the actors as best as possible, although Ang Lee notably hates dubbing and agreed to it reluctantly.
If not, consider this your execution.
Father!
Lee and the producers would borrow a page from the Wachowski playbook and, early on, tasked the award-winning Matrix visual effects team, Manix Visual Effects, with bringing ancient China to vivid life, employing then state-of-the-art pre-visualizations and storyboarding to accomplish some of the more difficult shots in the film. The entirety of ancient Beijing and most of Sir T's compound were created specifically for the film, although the compound exteriors were partly shot at the Chengde Summer Palace in Hebei Province. While set during the Qing Dynasty, which lasted from 1644 to 1912, there is no specific date given for the story's setting at first glance. But a sharp-eyed Chinese-reading viewer may notice that based on the paper Shu Lien provides to the city guards, the year 1778 can be deduced. This nebulous approach to the film's setting is meant to underline the vision of Ang Lee and production and costume designer Tim Yip, the pair hoping to evoke a, quote, China of the imagination, or a dream of China, as opposed to a perfectly accurate representation of Chinese history. Shu Lien gifts Sir T the Green Destiny, although he is reluctant to accept it, and is invited to stay the night, learning that Governor Yu and his family will also be arriving. The late esteemed Taiwanese actor Si Hong Long, a familiar face to fans of Ang Lee's earlier films, would be cast to play Sir T, once again seeing the actor in a kind of fatherly role, and the film would mark one of his last on-screen performances. Shu Lien quickly makes the acquaintance of the governor's daughter, Yu Xiaolong, or Jen, who is set to be married in the city. However, trouble soon arrives in the form of a mysterious and skilled thief, who snatches the Green Destiny in the dead of night, a building-leaping chase ensuing across the compound. This rooftop chase, one of the film's signature set pieces, would take a total of 2 weeks to film, and for certain shots, the camera operator would be placed on wires alongside the actors in order to put the audience directly into the action. Director of photography Peter Pao would be Ang Lee's third choice to shoot the film, Lee first considering renowned Chinese cinematographer Ga Chun-wei and Australian Hong Kong cinematographer Christopher Doyle. However, studio executives wanted someone with a stronger background in action, and Pao would be hired on the spot after arriving in Beijing. Filmed with RE435 cameras, which were particularly good at capturing high-speed movements, the film would be shot in Super 35 and converted in post to anamorphic widescreen. Super 35 was not only the cheaper option, but was better suited for intense close-ups, which Pao and Lee hoped to utilize. For the look of the film, Pao took inspiration from Chinese watercolors, which are characteristically soft with mild contrast, and would shoot the film with a relatively low-contrast Kodak 5277 stock. And Pao also collaborated heavily with production designer Tim Yip to ensure that the colors he used didn't overly desaturate the image. Pao would also act as the unofficial visual effects supervisor while on set, being the only one present with any substantial effects experience, although he would not be credited for this contribution. Pao would, however, go on to win the 2001 Academy Award for Best Cinematography. The script would not provide any detailed descriptions of the film's fight sequences, and the first draft came with a disclaimer from James Schamus that stated, "You will note in the script that none of the fight scenes are described, and I will just inform you now that they will be the greatest fight scenes ever in the history of cinema, period." Fresh off of 1999's The Matrix, legendary fight choreographer and director Yuen Woo-ping would be Ang Lee's first choice to replace those blank spaces in the script with some of the most thrilling fight sequences in cinema history. However, Lee would again break from tradition by directly involving himself with the shaping of the film's carefully crafted fight scenes. On a typical Hong Kong movie set, the action sequences would often be handed off to an experienced fight choreographer, often referred to as the action director, with the credited director having little to no involvement. However, Lee knew that in order to truly realize his dream of a groundbreaking contribution to the art form, he would have to helm the entire film himself. Therefore, Lee would work closely with Yin to map out the fights, Lee focusing on the emotion and character elements of the scenes, while Yin of course handled the physical aspects. While the two creative forces would often butt heads, the result would be kinetic action with emotional weight, and Lee said that he had approached the choreography and fight scenes as if he was filming a musical, the combat being more about conveying the feelings of the characters than who wins or loses. Additionally, Yin would prioritize fluid motion and elegance in his actors' movements over technical martial arts accuracy, in this way complementing Lee's emotionally driven action storytelling. While exaggerated abilities as seen in Wuxia were breaking new ground in Western movie theaters, Chinese audiences had long grown accustomed to the technique. However, Lee was at first conflicted about using Wuxia-style wire work, or wire fu as it has lovingly become known in the West, but ultimately settled on the side of tradition, finding the idea of defying gravity too exciting to pass up. Yin and his team would use extra thick wires that allowed the film to literally reach new heights in the genre. Each actor assigned a small team of wirework specialists to oversee their rigging. While the fight choreography itself would be practiced for months prior to filming, the wire work, despite extensive planning, mostly had to be improvised on the day of shooting. Manex Visual Effects would ultimately remove visible wires from a total of 350 shots in the film. Although the thief escapes, Shu Lien suspects that they are still within the compound, and soon after, Li Mu Bai arrives to help recover the weapon. for his performance in the 1991 festival hit, A Brighter Summer Day, and much like his co-stars, Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon would launch the actor into international stardom. This romantic flashback sequence, which was yet another departure from traditional wuxia cinema, would be the first segment shot, filmed entirely in the often unpredictable Gobi Desert near the border of Kazakhstan. There, the production faced onslaughts of inclement weather and endless geographical obstacles, easily making it the most challenging period of the entire shoot. On one particular night, a fierce sandstorm blew in that separated some of the crew members from the main group, and they ended up being lost in the desert for 2 days before turning up again. To Lo's dismay, Jen refuses to call off her marriage, but later she flees the city and her family with the Green Destiny on her back. A short time later, dressed as a young man, Jen stirs up mayhem at a peaceful forest inn. According to Ang Lee, Jen's foes in this scene were cast primarily for their faces, and while Lee pushed the limits of the genre, he would be sure to preserve certain cliches and Hong Kong-style action humor beats that Chinese audiences would be expecting. And this brawl at the inn was essentially planned as the film's comic relief, the lighter music accompanying it further underlining this intention. Later, Shu Lien catches up with Jen, offering her a way back to the life she abandoned. Nevertheless, Jen again refuses to follow any path but her own, and denied her friendship, Shu Lien challenges Jen to combat. This scene is meant to demonstrate both the strength of the Green Destiny and Shu Lien's prowess with weaponry. And Shu Lien's weapon of choice also reflects her preference for the Dao, a broad curved saber, as opposed to the Jian straight sword Jen wields. Their battle for the Green Destiny can also be interpreted as, by extension, a battle over Li Mu Bai, as he pursues Jen for discipleship while Shu Lien quietly yearns for his love. The film's many weapons, all meticulously researched by Ang Lee, would be crafted in Taiwan by Lee's neighbor, famed swordsmith Kuo Changxi. The Green Destiny itself would be 1 meter long and hand-engraved with 100 dragons, the sword also forged over 100 times to achieve its famous sharpness. According to Ang Lee, the character of Yu Shu Lien was written specifically for Michelle Yeoh, and he pitched the film to Yeoh as Sense and Sensibility with martial arts. Yeoh was already one of the most celebrated stars of her generation, but at the time was best known to Western audiences as Deadly Bond Girl Wei Lin in 1997's Tomorrow Never Dies, her English-speaking film debut. A dancer by training, the busy actor came with a long filmography in Hong Kong action cinema where, like in Crouching Tiger, she often performed her own stunts, although she was looking forward to exercising her acting chops under Lee's direction. In fact, Yeoh would take a year off from acting to study Mandarin and train for her extensive fight scenes. Sadly, despite her efforts, Yeoh would badly injure her knee during the first week of shooting, tearing her ACL ligament, and was rushed off to the United States for emergency surgery. After a 3.5-week hiatus, she would be required to film the remainder of her action scenes wearing a knee brace, and many of her dialogue scenes had to be filmed sitting down or with very little movement, which is why there is little walking and talking seen in the film. Yeoh would also struggle to grasp the Mandarin dialogue, the Malaysian actor having grown up speaking English and Malay. While she did speak rudimentary Mandarin, Yeoh could not actually read the language, and therefore had to learn all of her lines in Pinyin, the romanized version of Mandarin Chinese characters. While Yeoh did slowly recover throughout filming, some of her more intensive wire stunts had to be performed by a double. While Shu Lien is the superior fighter, her weapons are no match for the Green Destiny. After Jen draws first blood, Li Mu Bai swiftly intervenes, another chase taking flight. Filmed in the famous Anji Bamboo Forest in Zhejiang Province, this iconic chase would require the actors to be hoisted up on wires into the treetops by extremely tall cranes. Nearly all of this sequence captured on location and in camera. The setting was directly inspired by King Hu's 1971 wuxia classic, Touch of Zen, and because they were filming in late summer, Li and the production had to work fast to capture the vibrant greens of the bamboo leaves before they turned. Choreographer Yin Wu-ping was at first adamantly against the scene, which was both dangerous and almost impossible to choreograph. This scene also highlights that green is obviously a major visual theme in the film. In Taoism, the color representing the yin, or the female aspect, and Ang Lee gave the sword in question its name, Green Destiny, to symbolize Zhen Yu's need to have control over her own fate. According to editor Tim Squires, many of the shots he received from this sequence were unusable due to the messy and unpredictable wire work made more obvious by the difficulty of coordinating the actors with the tree branches. Ultimately, this entire scene had to be significantly altered from its scripted version in order to salvage the footage. Unlike in traditional Chinese martial arts movies, this is the final action scene of the film, and the next 15 minutes of screen time is devoted to a purely character-driven climax. Zhen is rescued from the shore by Jade Fox and taken to a nearby cavern where, shortly after, Li Mu Bai and Shu Lien discover her, but are quickly ambushed by Fox, armed with poison needles. Jade Fox's continued use of poison as a weapon is a manifestation of one of the film's main themes, how vengeance and bitterness poisons the soul. Upon her death, Jade also refers to the deceit of an 8-year-old girl, feeling that she has been spiritually poisoned by her devious former apprentice. Earlier, Li Mu Bai also warned Shu Lien that Zhen would become a poisoned dragon if not properly trained and disciplined. The somewhat sympathetic death of Jade Fox and her poisoning of Li Mu Bai was a bit of a risk for Li and the writers. Because of its subtitles, the film would be deemed art house cinema in the West, but in China and its surrounding markets, audiences viewed the film as another pop-cultural action movie, and having the story's villain and hero die in sudden and unexpected ways was definitely pushing the genre envelope at the time. Although actor Jet Li had been considered early on, Chinese megastar Chow Yun-fat would be Ang Lee's choice to play warrior in crisis, Li Mu Bai. Outside of China, Chow was already gaining notoriety, having made his American film debut in 1998's The Replacement Killers. But like some of his co-stars, Chow came with no experience in martial arts, or period pieces for that matter, known primarily for playing gun-wielding badasses in John Woo action films. Chow spent 6 months practicing his swordsmanship ahead of filming, and Li later stated that he liked the idea of casting Chow in the role because he felt Li Mu Bai, in a way, reflected the actor himself at that point in his career. However, one area of contention for the actor was the character's historically accurate haircut, which required Chow to shave his head and don a wig. To convince the star to commit, Li commissioned a digital mock-up of what Chow would look like in the final makeup, and he was fortunately satisfied with the result. Another challenge for Chow would of course be the language itself. Being from Hong Kong, Chow spoke with a defined Cantonese accent, and later stated that for the first time in his career, he had to do 28 takes on the first day of filming because he had trouble correctly pronouncing the Mandarin dialogue, and added that, overall, he felt his handling of the language was terrible. The Green Destiny is at last returned to Sir Ti, and Zhen heads to Wudang Mountain, where she reunites with Lo. The sacred Wudang Mountain, the historical home of the Wudang Khan class of Chinese martial arts, was doubled by the historical and scenic Mount Kangyan in Hebei, about 2 hours southwest of Beijing, and Zhang Ziyi and Chen Cheng, along with the entire crew, had to actually walk up each one of those steps every day of shooting. Chen had to be brought back nearly 5 months after he wrapped filming, and because he had already cut his hair, the actor had to be fitted with a wig for his final scenes. The film's somewhat controversial ending is mostly left to interpretation. Lo finds Zhen along the mountainside, where she recalls the story of the young man who jumped off the mountain. In the legend, the young man wished to be truly free and unburdened of his life, and because his heart was true, he miraculously survived his leap of faith and floated time, was performed by Chinese singer and songwriter Coco Lee, with an accompanying music video produced to further market the film. Lee would later perform the song in front of a live audience at the 2001 Academy Awards ceremony. While Tan Dun wouldn't take home the Golden Globe that year, losing to Hans Zimmer for Gladiator, he would go on to win the Academy Award for Best Original Score, as well as the Grammy for Best Score Soundtrack Album.
America's top critics agree, Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon is everything we go to the movies for.
After premiering out of competition at the 2000 Cannes Film Festival on May 18th, the film would be widely distributed by Sony Pictures Classics in North America and Columbia TriStar for the remainder of the global market. Kicking off with a summer run in Asian cinemas and finishing with a late premiere in the United States on December 8th, beginning with a limited run and going wide on the 22nd, it would play in US cinemas for a total of 31 weeks, there becoming the first foreign language film to earn over $100 million, and today stands as the highest grossing foreign-produced foreign language film in US box office history. The film would also emerge as a surprise international mega success, raking in over $213 million worldwide. The film would, of course, premiere as a critical darling, receiving near unanimous praise for its genre innovations, performances, choreography, and Ang Lee's direction. At the 73rd Academy Awards, where the film held a record 10 nominations, including Best Picture and Best Director for Ang Lee, which were the most nominations for a non-English-speaking film in Academy history at that time, it would take home 4 Oscars in total, including Best Foreign Language Film, and to date, is the only martial arts film ever to receive a nomination. It would win 4 more awards at the 54th Annual BAFTAs, and 2 more at that year's Golden Globes. In total, Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon would claim 40 international awards.
Zhang Ziyi from Columbia.
The film would make its home media premiere on June 5th, 2001 in the form of a VHS and DVD release from Columbia TriStar Home Entertainment. The DVD presented the film in its original 2.351 aspect ratio, and offered several special features, including an audio commentary by director Ang Lee and co-writer and producer James Schamus, in addition to Bravo's making-of special, Unleashing Dragons. In October 2016, Sony Pictures released the film on Blu-ray for the first time in honor of its 15th anniversary, presented in 1080p from a 4K master with a Dolby Atmos soundtrack. The release included newly produced special features as well as 6 never-before-seen deleted scenes, in addition to again offering the 2001 DVD audio commentary track and a new feature commentary from cinematographer Peter Pao. In December 2020, in honor of its 20th anniversary, the studio again released the film in the form of a limited edition 4K Blu-ray Steelbook, which featured gorgeous new cover art and came with the same bonus material offered in the 2016 release. Unfortunately, this edition is now out of print and sells on sites like eBay for a hefty price. The author's work would again be adapted under the title of its 4th installment, in the form of a 12-volume Wuxia comic book series from Chinese author and artist Andy Sito. Published by HK Comics Limited in China and Comics One for English prints, the series running until 2005. In 2003, the film itself would be adapted into a third-person beat-em-up video game of the same name for the PlayStation 2, Xbox, and Game Boy Advance. Developed by the Japanese companies Bergsala Lightweight and Genki and published by Ubisoft in North America, the game would feature platforming directly inspired by the film, in addition to again showcasing Tan Dun's score, and the story more or less follows the film's basic plot. Player is able to choose between characters Li Mu Bai, Yu Shu Lien, Zhen Yu, and Lo. Unfortunately, unlike the film, the game would be panned by both players and critics, who took issue with its poor graphics, awkward camera angles, and lack of original engrossing gameplay. Because of the film's cultural and financial impact, the early 2000s would see a spike in popularity for the wuxia genre, with films like Hero, House of Flying Daggers, Curse of the Golden Flower, The Forbidden Kingdom, and even the heavily edited re-release of Yuen Woo-ping's Iron Monkey becoming relative international successes. In 2016, a direct sequel to the film titled Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, Sword of Destiny would premiere on Netflix in the United States, with a small theatrical run internationally. Directed by Yuen Woo-ping, the film would star Donnie Yen and would see the return of Michelle Yeoh as Yu Shu Lien. The film is an adaptation of the final book in Wang Dulu's Crane Iron pentalogy, Iron Knight, Silver Vase, which is a much better title in my opinion, and tells the story of Shu Lien being forced out of retirement to once again protect the Green Destiny from a dangerous warlord. In a major departure from its predecessor, the sequel would be filmed with the actors speaking English, and would later be dubbed in Mandarin for Chinese markets. Unfortunately, the film would be panned by critics, who saw it as a cheap and clunky disappointment with merely serviceable action and performances. I thought it was pretty okay.
Maybe because we lost some of the innocence of watching a fantastic movie when we're young, and we lost that innocence, we don't believe that anymore, and somehow a foreign language film that come in that's fresh and refreshing and that offer that innocence, that you're willing to be a child again, and they can totally invest their emotion and believe in something silly, fantastic, emotional, and all that stuff without losing their composure. They just cave in.
Fantastic.
Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon would elevate Ang Lee from the status of beloved Chinese art house director to one of the most revered filmmakers in the world, and a household name. Now, over 20 years later, his film stands as one of the rare few to have created a ripple in the fabric of cinema. A film that not only united Eastern and Western audiences, but had something unique to offer for each of them. Of course, the film's not everyone's cup of tea, and perhaps those who prefer their wuxia fast and cheap may find the film's sometimes slower pace and character-driven nature to be too much of a departure from what one would expect from the genre. But, of course, some would say that it is this subversiveness that Lee has so expertly introduced into the martial arts fantasy that sets Crouching Tiger apart. And its objective strengths, stunning locations and costume design, world-class performances, Tan Dun's defining music, and Yuen Woo-ping's brilliantly realized action choreography, all amount to an experience like no other. But what may be the film's biggest achievement is that it casts such a wide net of appeal. I was just 13 years old when it hit US cinemas and was lucky to have seen it 4 times during its run. And while I was certainly in it for the mesmerizing action, cool weaponry, and sweeping fantasy narrative, I've come to appreciate the film on a much deeper level. And in a weird way, that makes it a movie for all ages. The thing classics are made of. So let me know your thoughts on Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon. Is it a cinematic treasure, or maybe a little too far-fetched for your taste? What's your favorite wuxia film from the 2000s, and would you like to see Ang Lee someday return to the genre? And as always, everyone, thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, go ahead and click like below, and feel free to share. And don't forget to find me on Patreon at /LaytonEversol, where you'll gain early access to my channel's content and more. And of course, if you want to